here. We out here on this. Y'all, we out here on some nut shit. Y'all already know what it is. Y'all already know what it is. Y'all already know what it is.
Wait, time out. I don't have a good song on. I don't even have a song on.
And welcome back to another episode of the Bittersweet Taste Podcast. Thank you very much for my friends who are part of that new intro that you just heard. I only asked really Sarah if she could be in it. I didn't ask Emma or Baba or John, but hopefully they don't kill me when they hear it. And hopefully you guys like it. If you guys like it, please let me know. I think I kind of threw that intro together a little bit. Only took me maybe half an hour to get that whole thing going. But hopefully as episodes progress, I'm going to have a better version of that as we move forward. But I expect that intro at the beginning of each episode from here moving forward. So before we get into the actual episode, I want to start with a massive disclaimer for this episode, since this is going to be a more, I'll say, controversial topic. Some of the topics I would be talking about today could be triggering to some people. Excuse me. I want to be clear that I'm a firm believer that all people who do commit crimes or act without morals should be punished accordingly. And I don't want to be painted anyway as a, blank apologist before I even get to season 2 of the podcast. So just please keep that in mind. I'm really kind of introducing this topic as a form of discussion. Of course, I'm kind of voicing my opinion on the topic. And as always, all views expressed on today's episode are purely my opinion. And until my microphone forms its own opinion, my opinion is the only one here, so it is the only correct one. So let's get into it. Some of the biggest gripes that I have with the way that society reacts now as it pertains to celebrities as a whole, not even just musicians, is really kind of the views, words, and actions of celebrities are too heavily weighted and critiqued. I think cancel culture is way too swift, way too harsh, and has zero regulation or any kind of accountability or any kind of checks and balances, per se. And I think people are insanely complex, and the general public kind of forgets that when it comes to celebrities, especially musicians. And I introduce these ideas because they fit pretty well into my argument. And the argument and the topic of today's episode is that art can and should be separated from an artist. Let me preface my argument, by saying that the quote-unquote, my podcast, My Opinion is Right joke that I made at the beginning of the episode and that I've made before isn't exactly how I feel when it comes to this topic. While I will defend my opinion on this for my own listening habits, I will still respect any person's listening habits if they have the opposing opinion of mine. For example, some of my friends up at college are very much against Chris Brown and his past events. Chris Brown I'll talk about a little bit later. So that when I'm playing music, if I'm lucky, if I am blessed enough to have aux at at whatever gathering we're at, I will refrain from playing his music because I know that they kind of refuse to follow his music for all the terrible things that he did in his past. I also think it's important to note that I believe that this argument is insanely situational to some degree, and there are obviously levels to it, some of which I will talk about as we progress with this episode. So, as I previously stated, I am a firm believer that artists, as a person, should be able to be separated from the art that they produce. For anyone who is unfamiliar with this argument, this kind of phrasing means that I can support the art, in this case, music, that a person makes without actually supporting the person themselves or any of their past actions, behaviors, ideals, any of that. There are two separate entities, or rather they can be separated into completely separate entities if, on a situation by situation basis. And more often than not, I kind of tend to do that. This applies also to the vice versa case, where I can dislike the art but like the artist. So, I'm not trying to cherry pick here or be hypocritical in my argument. I think it goes both ways. You can, the way that people kind of use this argument is that, why would you listen to so-and-so? They did these things. How can you support someone who does those things? And it's like, well, I like the music, so I will listen to the music and I can listen to the music. The way I look at music, the way that I think more people should look at music, in my opinion, should be that, you can listen to the music and just listen to the music, almost in a vacuum. I know it's hard to, and I know that in some situations it's insanely hard to separate it. But I think in most situations, I think it's appropriate and that it should be accepted. The main reason I'm a firm believer in this stance is because in most cases, I believe that music can, like I said, can easily be listened to and enjoyed without knowing anything about the artist. So using that kind of, like looking at it under that lens, it shouldn't have much of an impact on, like, the art, what the artist does or says shouldn't have that much of an impact on the music, on their music. A good example of this is one time I was driving with my mom, who is not a fan of Kanye at all. And by not a fan of Kanye, I mean, like, you know, she doesn't know anything about him other than just like the random headlines that always gets, you know, written about him and all this stuff, all of these crazy things that he does. So she's not a fan of him, right? And like I said, with very limited knowledge, she's not a fan of him. So, I mean, that's a completely different argument. But in terms of this situation, I was in the car with her, and I know she didn't like Kanye, but I was just playing through a place that, you know, I just was playing through a place, and Heartless came on, and at some point, you know, like, you know, I'm singing along, whatever. I noticed that she was singing along to the song. Like, she knew the chorus. Everyone knows that chorus. I mean, you know, everyone knows that chorus. But she was singing along to it, and when I asked her if she knew who made the song, she told me that she had no idea. And I kind of laughed to myself because I was like, like, you know, like I got it. Like this is like the gotcha moment that I live for, where it's like, you know, I told her who it was and she gave me like an, oh, okay, with this tone that was equal parts like surprised and like somewhat ashamed that she was singing along to this person that she dislikes. But that's kind of my point, right? So you can kind of, it's very easy to just listen to a song, like the song for what it is, and completely separate from the artist, right? You can like a song, not know who it's by, and vice versa. You can dislike a song, not know who it's by, you know? So yeah, with that kind of basis, that's kind of the main basis of where, like, my argument forms from. While I think that this argument can be made... Oh, actually, excuse me. Kind of skipped ahead of myself here. I should probably outline the structure of this episode. I'm going to first start out with explaining my point, which I already did in part. I'm going to continue going on with that. Then I'm going to give some examples of where and what situations I would apply my argument to, or where this argument has been applied to, some instances that I've noticed in the past that this argument has been applied to. And then I also want to acknowledge some counter-arguments that I've heard from my friends, or from like my parents, or just from other people in the past, that I will do my best to kind of respond to, if that makes sense. So yeah, kind of going out of place there. Excuse my poor reading, but moving on. Well, I think that this argument can be made in any case. This argument of the separation of art versus artist can be made in any case that involves any sort of quote-unquote art and any sort of quote-unquote artist. I am more personally inclined to support the separation when it comes to music, as you know, as you guys all know. I mean, I started podcasts around it, so music is insanely important to me, and obviously I'm going to be more biased towards the music, towards this argument as it pertains to music. So, like, I mean, like, you know, let me think. I'm not too in the know of painters or like any, you know, like you can also apply this argument in some sense, like athletes, or to anyone, it really any kind of celebrity or any kind of person where they create something. I think you can apply this argument, but again, this is a music podcast, so I'm only going to be talking about music cases here. Excuse me. And for myself, the case-by-case use of this argument depends on two things. And part of, when I've talked to my friends about this, this is a really big disconnect between my argument and someone else's, and the counter-argument. And it's that the case-by-case use of this argument of separation of art and artist is, to me, it depends very heavily on two things. The quality of the music, which means basically how much I appreciate or enjoy the actual music, compared to the quote-unquote cancelable, quote-unquote negative, quote-unquote offensive situation that the artist is in, right? So simply put, I will still listen to music from an artist if the enjoyment that the music brings me, that the song brings me, that the album brings me, is greater than the degree of the negative situation that they're in, if that makes sense. And one of the problems with this argument is that, as all things are with music and music adjacent, it's all insanely subjective. So Chris Brown is a big case for this, where I'll talk about this I'll talk about this next. In Chris Brown's case, what he did was horrible, like absolutely horrible, insanely just. I guess you can go as far as saying inhumane, but just like a scummy ass thing to do. However, I personally love the music that he produces, that he creates. So that's like, if you don't like Chris Brown enough, then the way that I'm forming this argument, if you don't like Chris Brown's music enough, you're obviously going to not listening to his music because of what he did is not going to be a big issue for you. However, I really appreciate Chris Brown's music personally. So it's just kind of like, well, it's more of a question to me is, can I, with everything that surrounds, this person and what they did, what they said, whatever, can I live with seeing that name pop up on my phone every time I listen to their song that I love? And again, I'll talk about more, but in the case of Chris Brown, that's a case where the music does matter more. The impact that the positive impact that the music has to me is greater than the negative impact that the situation that he's been in has to me, if that makes sense. And again, I want to say that, obviously, I don't want to, actually, I'll say that. This kind of, what I'm talking about now will become more apparent when I go through what I'm going to call my case studies. And for this argument, my case studies, I'm going to be talking about Kanye West, Michael Jackson, Chris Brown, Tory Lanez, and Sabrina Claudio, all of whom were chosen because of their specific situations and my varying opinions on their music. So I felt like I picked these because I thought, all right, well, I like all these artists to different degrees, and the situations that they found themselves in that would cause people to not want to listen to their music anymore also vary in different degrees. So I picked these because they kind of hit both ends of the spectrum all the way through on two different ends. So in case you're wondering why I picked those specific few, that's why. Also because I tend to follow more of these artists a little bit in depth more. So I know slightly more about them and I have more fleshed out opinions on them. And like I mentioned before, I don't want my views on these studies to be viewed potentially as me, downgrading the events that happened, the events of the victims, or defending the actions of the accused. I do not want any of this, what I'm going to talk about, or I don't want the whole episode or the tone of this episode to have that kind of connotation where I'm somehow downplaying, what happened in the situations. I mean, everyone can have their opinion on the situations, and again, I will say, I will be very clear that which ones are, drastically horrible and which ones are more tame to me. Obviously, everyone has their own opinion on that, but I don't want to beat around the bush or, again, downplay anything that happened, any of the situations, because some of the things were terrible and some of the things were not terrible, but, I mean, that's my opinion on them, and I'll be sure to specify those on a case-by-case basis. I think I should also mention, before I talk about these artists, that some of the information given here is any degree in between of alleged, confirmed, or hypothetical, and of course, each one of those to varying degrees. So I will do my absolute best to be as clear as I can on the validity of the information that I'm giving you guys. Also, I will be discussing these case studies with reasons that I've heard people say are enough to merit them to stop listening to yours. So I might not cover every single small bad thing that each artist, quote unquote bad thing that each artist has done in the past, because this would be a ridiculously long podcast, especially like the Kanye part, or even like the Chris Brown or the Michael Jackson part. But I'm gonna just kind of set the scene and then give my opinion on the scene, and then we'll just go for there. So just letting you know what you guys are in for. So, like I said, let's start off with Kanye. Excuse me. So we're gonna start off with Kanye for two reasons. One, because he's my favorite artist, so my obvious bias will be shown off at the very beginning. So you can I'm doing that for the listener to very clearly, for you guys, to very clearly see what my bias is, and like how I kind of use my bias in cases like this. So like, it's very obvious from the start. This is my favorite artist, so I'm going to very heavily, vouch for his music. And two, because I think his quote-unquote offenses aren't that bad compared to some of the other things I'll be talking about. So at the very best, Kanye West is purely and I'll say some of these are self-admitted, bipolar creative troll who has trouble successfully forming his thoughts into accurate sentences. That's the best case scenario, you know what I mean? And at his worst, or at the worst, he's just an idiot with a massive platform and a massive group of followers that will just follow him no matter where they go. Some of you guys are probably saying like, hey, that sounds like you, Nick. And I'm saying, well, to an extent, but I'll get to that. And actually, it's funny because while I wouldn't say that I'm a quote-unquote overall Kanye stan, since I really disagree with a lot of his political, social ideals, and tendencies, and like just sometimes the way he carries himself, I dislike very heavily. So I wouldn't say I'm a stan of the entire personality, because I do, again, this is me splitting up the artist from the art. I'm not a fan of, sometimes I'm a fan of Kanye, sometimes I'm not. As of late, I haven't been. But I would consider myself to be a quote-unquote artistic Kanye stan, where it's just like, everything that he has made, from his music to his clothing, to me is the highest tier to me personally. So, splitting those two up, I can splitting those two aspects up. I would say I'm artistic cards. If you were gonna some of my friends call me a Kanye stan, which is fine, because I'll eat that. I'll talk about him all day, every day, if you let me. But it's, at the end of the day, it really just comes down to the music to me. And honestly, if I never looked at anything Kanye did from the beginning of time when I started listening to his music to now, I would most likely still find his music to be as amazing as it is, completely separate from him as an artist. So I said that to say that, like, basically the vast majority of my admiration for Kanye is a tribute to his music. And like when he first showed up, or should I say, when he first showed up with like the MAGA hat on, or when he infamously interrupted Taylor's VMA speech, and we'll get Conspiracy Nick on a future episode for that. But for now, I'll save that. And, just like how he just says so much wild shit, like at his rallies, or just like on Twitter in general, or whatever. I can comfortably sit here and say to you guys, to anybody, that Kanye is being a fucking idiot. I can tell you that. I can tell you that Kanye's a fucking idiot, and then immediately put my headphones back on, and then start listening to Flashing Lights. Like, I can do that. That's absolutely no issue for me. And I know that might sound kind of weird to some people, but like, again, like, that's the whole structure of the argument. I can completely dislike the artist and what they're doing and what they're saying, but if the music is good, that's all I care about. Not that I want anything like this to happen, just, but it would take a lot of bad Kanye scenarios to play out before I would have to stop listening to his music. Due to, again, the massive difference between the severity of his quote unquote offenses and how highly I regard his music. So, it's like, again, if there were a bar graph where the two bars are how shitty of a human is Kanye West, and how good does Nick think his music is, the music bar is, off the chart, and the how shitty of a person is Kanye West is, has some height to it, but not even close, not even on the same scale to each other. So to me, like, Kanye would have to do something really bad for me to stop listening to his music. But let's now take a look at an artist where that difference is a lot smaller and kind of look at it this way. So for that case, I'm using Tory Lanez. If you don't know who Tory Lanez is, that's fine. But he's a Canadian rapper who kind of infamously had a long-term beef with Drake because they were both Canadian and they were both kind of making similar music. I say similar because Drake makes way better music than Tory Lanez does, but Tory Lanez is more of a rapper. Anyway, whatever. Not about that. But if you don't really follow music, I'll say music adjacent news, then you might not have heard of the big mess that he, and again, allegedly, throw the allegedly lights on in your head right now. This is all alleged. Nothing has come out yet confirmed, but this is allegedly probably what happened. But into this big mess that he allegedly got into with Meg Thee Stallion. Meg Thee Stallion, female rapper, one of the hottest, and by hot I mean like popularity, just like popular over time artists, especially rappers in the game right now. And from what I quote unquote know, what I allegedly know of this situation, Tory and Meg were friendly to some degree, but during the last couple of months, or over the last couple of months, doing things, whatever, celebrity friend shit, like, just hanging out with each other, going on Instagram Live together, attending parties together, etc. Long story short, a few weeks ago, there was a report that Tory Lanez allegedly shot Meg, who was presumably unarmed, in both of her feet. Both of her feet. Following some sort of argument, following a party, following whatever. So allegedly, Tory Lanez shot Meg Thee Stallion in her feet. Both of her feet. Super bitch shit. Massive bitch shit on Tory's part, if that's true. And in this case, so this is alleged that this happened, right? So I'm already kind of weaning off. I don't listen to Tory Lanez music a lot, nor do I really like all his music. Not only let me restart that. Excuse me. I don't regard his music to any sort of degree where I don't mind just completely not listening to him. Like if Tory Lanez just disappeared, if he and his music just disappear from the planet, I would not be sad. But I mean, some of it I enjoy. But it's not like I love it. But if it's confirmed, like if this news ends up being like confirmed that Tory Lanez did this horrible thing to Meg Thee Stallion, Tory Lanez music is nowhere near good enough for me to just overlook how insane of a case of, I'm going to call it domestic violence. I'm not sure the exact definition of domestic violence, but if this news if this news is true, or if this alleged case is true that Tory did this, yeah, his music's getting dropped. I'm not listening to anything that he does. Sorry, like, it's just like, it doesn't, and that's kind of my point, right? I'm not emotionally attached to Tory Lanez's music, and his crime to me is massive. Domestic violence is not a joke. It's insane. Like, it's absolutely absurd that it happens at such a high rate, especially so publicly, in terms of like rappers and just the rap scene in general. But again, like, if it's true, his music's getting dropped, no problem, zero problem doing that. It's all going off my phone. That really good oh God, what the fuck is his name? He was on the Jack Harlow, that really good Jack Harlow remix. Unfortunately, that song is leaving my phone. Sorry, Jack. Can't support that. Like, you don't shoot a defenseless person out of anger. Bottom line, you just don't do that. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Come on, man, seriously. But I shouldn't be laughing because it's really serious and just whatever. But yeah, you don't shoot a defenseless person out of anger, especially not a woman, and especially not Meg Thee Stallion. Like, especially not Meg Thee Stallion. Meg Thee Stallion is, again, like I said, one of the hottest artists out there, period. You picked the worst person to, like, assault. It was headlines for so long, and every little drop of information there is makes more headlines. It's ridiculous. Like, why? Come on. Unfortunately, or fortunately, his mixtape series is not worth. It's not worth harming a woman like that. Hell no. Speaking of harming a woman, let's talk about Chris Brown. And I put this one specifically in the middle because for my generation, this is probably the most polarizing example of where this argument can be used in the past years, and for good reason, right? In my opinion, and again, I'll preface with this, in my opinion, Chris Brown is still one of the most talented musicians out right now, despite his poor choice in album length as of late, but whatever. I think he's one of the most talented artists. I don't want to say in history because I'm not well read enough to actually solidify that opinion, but from the music I listen to and from the music I follow, he is one of the most talented artists that I recognize, right? Even in his younger years, he was primed to be absolutely unstoppable as an artist, right? That was until he made the absolutely genius decision to assault the living hell out of his girlfriend. And, like I said, and I said this on the last case, domestic violence, no joke, one of the most horrible things you can do to a person, someone who trusts you, someone who's around you, just absolutely horrible thing you can do. And that goes for both sides. Male on female, female on male, same, different, doesn't matter. Domestic violence, horrible. And especially after reading the police report, years ago, and I reread a little bit of it when I was writing the script for this, and I, obviously when I was doing my research for this podcast, I saw the pictures popped up, those infamous pictures of Rihanna looking all battered and just horrible. And like I said, the thing is, domestic violence, horrible, obviously. Don't hit your fucking girlfriend. And similar to Tory Lanez, don't hit fucking Rihanna. Why the fuck are you hitting Rihanna, man? Come on. IDK, Jesus Christ. I don't know. I don't know if y'all have heard about Rihanna at all, but at the time, and even more now, she was probably one of the biggest names in music, period. Why? What I'll say is that if cancel culture existed to any degree that it did today, back then in 2009, Chris Brown would not be making music today, probably. Maybe he would be, but he would not have even close to the amount of support that he still has from the industry, which is probably the bigger thing. And the reason this is probably right. I mean, he definitely assaulted Rihanna, but this whole scenario of cancel culture being in 2009, he probably would not be making music today. And I say probably because he makes really good music, so it's And this is a good case of, I can't really say this much about Kanye because or what I'm about to say next, I can't really say too much about Kanye because Kanye puts a lot of himself and a lot of his experiences and a lot of his ideals and stuff into his music. So there could be a little less of this example. I can't use this example for Kanye, but for Chris Brown, I feel like, in my opinion, that his music is so good, such of high quality to me, again, and also just good music in general. Not even good music for him, just good music in general. That, to me, it fully transcends Chris Brown himself and reaches a level of art that I can appreciate without paying any mind to the trash human being that made it. And that's essentially what I do. I don't follow Chris Brown on Instagram. I don't follow him on socials. I don't buy his merchandise. I don't go to his concerts. Nothing. No added resources other than the music. The music is the only thing I like. Well, the only thing I love, and the only thing that I need from him. And I can enjoy his music completely separate from every other aspect of his life. Listen, I'll be the first to tell you that Chris Brown is an absolute garbage human being for attacking a woman like that. I will be the first, the middle, and the last person to tell you that. And followed by a bunch of other people saying the exact same thing in between. But where I think where I think the argument kind of plays here is that, excuse me, I can, like you can, the argument kind of gets confused, or where people I've had this argument with or this conversation with kind of get it confused, where if I'm supporting their artist, and I'll talk about this later when I'm acknowledging some of the counter arguments, but some people have told me that, like, like if you, kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but it's like, well, if you like their music, then you like them, then you must like them. And it's like, no. No, some of the best people, some of the worst people in the world make the best music. Sorry, some of the worst people, some of the best people in the world make the worst music. It's just kind of, the music is the music to me. Like, there's no correlation for the most part. Logic. We came off of Logic a couple episodes ago. So I mentioned him, widely regarded in the industry as one of the nicest people in the world. But I mean, he releases every once in a while. He just releases a trash project. So it's like, I like Logic. Seems like a cool dude. But if his song is bad, I'm not gonna listen to it. Little digression there, but like, again, like, Chris Brown is an absolute garbage human being. But until you give me someone who can make Run It, Heartbreak on a Full Moon, and K, he's going to be in my playlist. And I'll apologize for my friends at Penn State specifically, who do not share that opinion with me, or for anyone else listening who does not share that opinion with me. But, again, I'm not trying to dictate how other people listen to music. It just kind of is a shame to me when good music just gets completely erased from his existence from people because they don't like the artist. Yeah. All right, 2 examples left, and from here I'll move on to Michael Jackson. I remember a few months ago, or maybe it was like probably a year ago at this point, I don't know. Whenever that last documentary, quote unquote documentary about Michael Jackson's alleged sexual misconduct with children was broadcasted on whatever, or the TV special, whatever. And I remember what came out, and the night it came out, I tweeted something to the effect of, well, I really hope I don't have to stop listening to Thriller after I watch this program, whatever. And while it was meant to be slightly amusing in tone, I guess a little bit edgy in tone, the message is really true. If during one of the past trials, which, if you're not, I'm assuming that most of you guys know the general backstory of what I'm talking about with Michael Jackson, all the insane legal era, I'll say, that he went through with these kids, or allegedly went through with these kids. Excuse me. Yeah, if like he went through it time and time again, and they found nothing. There was nothing. Whatever. You can go to more conspiracy theories about that, which again I won't touch here because that's not the point of this episode. But if during one of, for some reason, if during one of the past trials, or for, like, say, hypothetically, right? Completely hypothetically, if during one of the past trials, or for some reason, some new investigation that went on, and Michael Jackson was found guilty of misconduct with those kids, then I would never be able to listen to his music again, right? Absolutely. I talked about domestic abuse being horrible. No, child abuse probably beats that. I think the general populace can get under that, can ride with that opinion that child abuse is astronomically worse than domestic abuse, which is astronomically horrible in the first place. Even though he is another artist to me whose work has transcended his person and taken on a life of its own, like I said at the very beginning of this episode, there are levels to this. And like I said, hypothetically speaking, if he in fact did do all these things that he had been investigated for, that kind of evil would be enough to completely overshadow and overpower how great his music is. Just immediately. Without any kind of... I would not lose sleep at night knowing that I no longer can listen to Thriller. Like, if that happened. You know what I mean? If that happened. Again, in this hypothetical scenario where Michael Jackson actually did these absolutely horrible things, it's one, oh god, unfathomably horrible thing to do, what he was investigated for. So much so that Thriller's not that good to me comparatively. Thriller, or any I'm just using Thriller as an example, but when I say Thriller, I mean just like his general music catalog. Thriller is not good enough. His music catalog is not good enough to overpower that scenario if it's true. Not even close. Probably nobody's music catalog is. Probably nobody's anything is that close. Is close enough to overpower something like that. Well, look at our... I'm not going to... Not a political podcast. It is worth mentioning that I have no distinct attachment to Michael Jackson's music. So, in terms of this argument, giving up his music in this hypothetical scenario wouldn't be that much of an issue. And, you know, like I said before, when I was talking about Kanye, a lot of it does come down to emotional attachment to the music, and like I said, I'm not too emotionally attached to Michael Jackson's music, so I would not lose sleep with not being able to listen to it if his accusations were true. And I'll finish off with Sabrina Claudio, because I think this is probably the lightest or the least offensive thing in this list, or the least offensive person in this list. And she's not nearly as big of an artist as any of the previous four, so I don't know if you guys listening knew any of this, and I know at least one person that might have a problem with this, and it's a shame because I know that that person really likes their music, and I'm going to be sad if I lose a fellow Sabrina Claudio follower. But you know, if this is news to you, sorry / you're welcome that I'm breaking it to you. But yeah, let's just go into it. So soon after I first found Sabrina Claudio, way back in whatever year I talked about, it was found that she used to own a quote-unquote secret Twitter account when she was in high school. Keep in mind, she's 23 right now. I think she turns 24 in September. So she was in high school. It was, you know, it was like, I think the article that I read, it was an account from like 4 to 7 years ago. So high school. It was when she was in high school. And that Twitter contained tweets of her degrading or making jokes about Black and Hispanic women, which also is not good. Not good at all. There was also some use of the N-word, because of course there was. If you didn't listen to episode, and I think this is confirmed. I think the Twitter account was confirmed to be hers, and she apologized for it. So, you know, that's the confirmation. She didn't exactly say what she was apologizing for specifically, but I'm gonna just run on the assumption that, you know, this is confirmed that, you know, she did these things, right? If you didn't listen to episode 9 of this podcast, where I talked entirely about Sabrina Claudio and her last album, it's somewhat worth noting that she's half Cuban and half Puerto Rican. I'm not gonna, you know, I say that not necessarily to shoot her bail, but just to give some kind of, like, I guess, just to give you guys a set, like the setting of what we're dealing with here, right? Also, during that episode and many other times, I've expressed my insane admiration for her and her music. So, again, like I said, this offense, if I'll call it that, is relatively minor in terms of how I reacted to it. Some people obviously are going to have a different degree of how severe that is, or they're going to have a completely different opinion on how severe that is. But to me, this seems like a relatively minor offense. I consider this offense to be minor for 3 reasons, none of which I really feel like talking or, you know, building on in this podcast. Maybe this separate podcast doesn't really have too much to do with music, some of them, but whatever. I feel like giving my reasoning for why I think this is minor, because I think it might help you guys understand why I have this opinion. But I consider this offense to be minor for 3 reasons. 1, because of my fairly loose opinion on the quote-unquote illegal use of the N-word, and the fact that she was posting those things as a kid. Oh, yeah. 1 thing. 2 things is the fact that she was saying / posting those things while she was a kid, and by kid, I'm referring to just a high schooler. I mean, high schoolers do dumb shit. I know all high schoolers do dumb shit, and I know it's kind of a tired counter-argument to, you know, high schoolers doing dumb, stupid shit. That's obviously bad, but, like, there was some merit to it, and I mean, whatever. It could have been worse. I'm sorry, it could have been worse. And the third thing is the fact that she apologized for her past actions, which, I mean, in her position, I guess what more can you do? She's very especially now. I mean, I follow her on Instagram. She's very vocal about like the Black Lives Matter movement and just like social justice and all this kind of stuff. So I mean, you can downplay that as her just kind of trying to cover for her past mistakes, but or her being dishonest about it. But I mean, it seems like it's coming from a good place, and all I know is from what I see in this scenario, I can't go inside her mind, so I just kind of have to take out her word for it. Some would argue that she should have done more to alleviate the harm that she caused the Black/Hispanic community, but, you know, my black ass is addicted to that voice, so her apology is sufficient. And again, in this case, I hold her music to such a high regard, and her offense to such a low regard, that I have zero issue listening to her. And again, if other people... I go on the timeline every once in a while just to I shouldn't say every once in a while, but I've gone on the timeline when she's released projects just to see what people are talking about, and, you know, they're always, it's pretty split down the middle. People, like, still holding on to just, like, you know, calling her racist, you know, bringing up her past and all this bad stuff that she said and all this stuff and just refusing to listen to her, and then the other half is just saying, you know, like, just completely ignoring that, which, again, in my case, I'm going to choose to ignore it, so, yeah. And yeah, so those are all the case studies I want to look at. Obviously, they could have been more fleshed out, but for the sake of time, I just wanted to, again, give you guys a scenario, give why people would think that they're cancelable, quote unquote, and then why I specifically do or do not, or would not cancel or stop listening to their music. And so again, I wanted to just quickly go over a few counter arguments that I've heard in the past, both from just people I know when I talk about this, because I tend to talk about this a good bit, because a lot of the, you know, artists are people make mistakes, people do dumb shit, so I listen to a lot of music, so I end up just eventually making it to some artist that just does some dumb shit that I like their music for. So I've heard a good bit of counter arguments. So here I'm going to bring up I'm going to start with the counter argument, and then I'll give my, I guess, counter to that counter argument to the best of my ability. So the first counter argument is the following: making this argument situationally hypocritical, and you should. Okay, so I'm also, you know, typing this as someone talking to me. So you, me. So making this argument situation is hypocritical, and you should apply the rules to every artist/situation the same. You can't listen to some people who did bad stuff and refuse to listen to others that did bad things, or they're the same or similar bad things, but I treat the music differently depending on an artist, or, you know, anything like that. And my counter to that would be, for this, I would refer to my note that there are levels to these. And I know it's kind of a cop-out phrase, like hype phrase to say, but, you know, there are levels to it. And I firmly believe that there are levels to it. Some actions merit more drastic reactions, and if the reaction is to no longer listen to an artist's music, I feel like the consumer's relationship to the music itself should be taken into account. And again, this is how I feel, and this is how I operate when I listen to music, and how I follow artists. And it's what I believe other people should do, solely based off of the fact that there's so much amazing music made by sometimes such garbage people. But, you know, I just like music that much. Or I'll overlook some stuff. Second counter-argument that I've heard is the following: if you stream an artist's music, then you're helping them to facilitate the lifestyle that allows them to do/say these bad things. And this argument was kind of formatted around financial gain for the most part. And I always hated this argument for 3 reasons. The first reason is because this is more of a kind of more objective reason. Streaming/purchasing music from an artist is the only legal way to listen to their music, and doing so contributes basically nothing to them financially compared to merchandise, touring, endorsements, etc. Which, again, are not, like I mentioned for Chris Brown, are not directly related or directly necessary for me to enjoy the music or to consume the music. So, you know, like I said, in Chris Brown's case, this refers to Chris Brown's case especially because, like I said, I will just listen to his music. I won't support him in any other way because I don't care about that. And I think any other way that I can support him is more supporting the person and not the music. The second reason I hate this argument is because Oh, also, a note on the streaming purchasing music snippet. If you guys aren't necessarily too privy to how the music industry works or how the music business works, artists make damn near nothing from, well, even before streaming, they made basically nothing off of like iTunes, things like that. First of all, Apple, when it comes to iTunes, takes, I believe, 30% of everything that goes through the platform that goes for apps and music. But, if you buy a single for $1.29, for $1.30, then what, 40 cents of that is going straight to Apple, just getting bit off the top? And I mean, you can do that math, whatever. And streaming is just far worse. Like, artists make damn near nothing. They make a fraction of a penny off every stream. So to me, streaming and purchasing music, if you're gonna use the financial kind of angle for this argument, then the streaming music doesn't really work, because it's like over Chris Brown's lifetime, and all the music that I streamed from him or Kanye West, I probably only contributed maybe $200 to the music, and that's just like a completely out of thin air number. It could be more, it could be less, but the point is the same. It's negligible. That impact from streaming is negligible. Second reason I hate this argument is because I purchase and stream music to support / influence the artist purely with the intent for them to make more music. And I'll articulate what I mean by that by giving you a metaphor. So if I give and kind of asking a rhetorical question, right? So if I give my friend $100 because he says, I need to buy a plane ticket home, whatever, I have $100, I can give him $100. If I give him that $100 to buy that plane ticket, under the assumption that he's going to indeed go buy that plane ticket, with the intent that he's going to go buy a plane ticket, and instead he leaves my house, turns around, buys a gun, and then shoots someone, am I expected to be held responsible for him shooting that person? Or rather, it's like, that's the way I see it. I know there's some flaws in that, it's a metaphor, it's a completely different scenario, but I think the message still holds, where it's just kind of like, I quote unquote, I support the music to get more music, and that's how that's the intent I have when I purchase the very little financial stake in whatever music they make. That's what I use my money for. Or that's the intent I have when I'm buying their music. So yeah. And then 3 is, I'd argue that money / support alone do not explicitly cause these events or explicitly allow for these events to happen. I mean, this is definitely not the best counter argument, but I mean, poor people do bad shit too. I mean, obviously, and it's a poor argument because obviously money gives you more opportunity, gives you more resources, but at the end of the day, bad people are going to do bad shit if they feel like doing bad shit. It's just kind of that simple, whether they have money or not. Like, in my opinion, someone like Chris Brown would have been an abuser whether I run it back in the day or not. Like, and that's kind of my point for that little. Again, it's not the strongest counter argument because it's completely hypothetical and completely based on really nothing, but to me, that's the way I think of it. Next counter argument is, if you support an artist's music, you're saying that their actions are okay. And my counter to this is similar to the previous counter argument, but simply put, no, it doesn't. And I mentioned it before. Saying that I like their music does not mean at all that I condone the actions that they do when when they're off doing their own shit. Not even close. And to me, that's a reaching counter argument. You could make an argument that listening to music that contains talk of these offenses supports the actions, which is a better argument, but it still does not account for the fact that music is a culmination of so many different elements that a consumer like me can appreciate some of those elements while disregarding the others. So, for example, I don't necessarily support being a routine side piece that SZA talks about on her song The Weeknd, but goddamn does her voice sound amazing, and goddamn is that instrumental great, and that song is just fantastic. But I can listen to the song and appreciate other parts of the song I think I and consumers have the ability to properly compartmentalize parts of a song and a song from the artist perfectly fine, to the point where I can like some specific things about a song enough that I like the song, but just completely disregard the others. You know what I mean? So, and this kind of relates back to like, all rappers talk about is like abusing women and just spending money on useless shit and like all this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's not necessarily why I like the music. I like the music because it sounds good. You know what I mean? So, it's the basis for that argument. And last counter argument, is, doesn't liking an artist help you like their music better / make you want to listen to their music more? And to that question, I would say I guess so. But to me, when a question like that is brought up, the more accurate comparison would be to ask, well, if you don't like a song at all, but you like the artist as a person, would you listen to the song? I think that's a more accurate comparison to my initial argument, right? And the answer to that question, like I said before, is no, I wouldn't. If I don't like the music that I'm not listening to, then I'm not going to listen to it, regardless of who made it or not. I don't care if Barack Obama came out with I don't know where I pulled Barack Obama out of, but if Barack Obama made an album tomorrow, I like Obama, I support Obama, but if the music isn't good, I'm not going to listen to the music, and that works in vice versa, or in any section version of that. Like I said, the same goes for the other way around. If I like the song but not the artist, I'm still going to listen to the song in most cases. Again, and I've, the whole point of what I said earlier is, there are degrees to it, obviously, but, it works both ways. And yeah, so as with any other music topic, I'd love to hear I'd love to hear others' opinions on it, and especially on this one, because I think that this is a really interesting argument to have, especially in this time period where we have such a prominent social media presence, and cancel culture is such a massive prominent thing in society, where it's just like all your old tweets and all your old things and what you did in 5th grade and all that stuff gets brought up at just random times that people just earthed up just to quote unquote cancel you. Like, I think that a topic like this is very interesting to discuss with other people, and I mean, some of you guys know me personally, so you guys can obviously reach out to me and talk to me about this anytime. Or if you don't want to do that and you just want to leave me a comment on YouTube, if you guys are watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube, be sure to leave a comment on there. I'll respond. I'll look at it. And again, I like having this conversation because I think a lot of people have different inputs on it. And I think it's there's no set way to look at this kind of topic. I think any person from any side can be completely correct. In this case, I think I'm completely correct in my analysis of it, but I mean, completely subjective. But yeah, so with that, I will leave you guys with that information, what I laid out today. Hopefully this episode will help clear up some of my music opinions moving forward, and some of my music opinions that you guys might have heard from me in the past. Yeah, so I actually was thinking about doing this episode a lot earlier than this, but the way that, I started structuring these episodes, I was like, oh, well, I'll just give it some time. I wanted to try some other things first, but I think it was important to give this episode relatively early in this show, because I think, again, if you listen to this, you have a very good idea of why I think some of the things I do about specific artists and the music that they make. So yeah. And since it is Thursday, we get new music tonight, and we actually have not a whole ton of new music. I won't say a whole ton, definitely more than last week, at least that music that was announced beforehand. And the first thing I have that I'm going to be looking forward to is the Lockdown remix by Anderson .Paak, which this remix features J-Rock, JID or JID, and No Name. Second thing I'm looking forward to is there's a new song that does not have a name, but it's going to release tonight by The Weeknd and Juice WRLD. I'm interested just because I don't know what it'll sound like. I mean, I know what it'll sound like, but I don't know what it's going to sound like. You know what I mean? I mean, I love The Weeknd. You guys know I'm kind of on the fence about Juice WRLD and his music, but I'm interested. I'm genuinely interested. The baby one I am most interested in, however, is this new Meg Thee Stallion and Cardi B song, And I will talk about Cardi B on a different episode, and I know Cardi B is horrible, but she makes fun music sometimes, so, and Meg Thee Stallion is the queen of rap to me right now, so we'll see how that song is. I'm so heavily looking forward to that song. And I'm looking forward to the Cardi B album whenever it's coming out, sorry. In terms of albums, there is an Amine, I don't know, this guy's been out for years, and I still don't actually fully know how to pronounce his name. I'm pretty sure it's Emine, I don't know, A-M-I-N with the accent E, or is the accent over to E? Whatever. He has a new album coming out tonight. I'm not the biggest fan of his, but I'll give it a listen for you guys, and maybe he can hopefully change my mind, because, I love new music, so I just like good music, so if he has some good songs in there. And then there's also the TK Mazda album. She released the track list earlier today, and it didn't look too long, which I was kind of disappointed by, because I think she released 3 singles already, and I think there may be like 8 songs on there, so like a good part of it are singles, which I was kind of disappointed by, but whatever. I'm looking forward to that album a lot. And of course, I will be talking about all that music and more on Monday. But I've been Nick Hope. This has been the Bittersweet Taste Podcast, and I will see you guys all on Monday.